Welcome to the deep dive. You've shared your sources with us, and we're here to sort of pull out the key stuff for you, acting as your shortcut to understanding.
That's right. And today we're really getting into the historical foundations of English law using the texts you send over.
Yeah, these texts focus on the traditional sources, the monarch, the nobility, and the church in England.
Exactly. And our mission, if you like, is to unpack those historical power dynamics, see how they shape the law, and maybe find some surprising links to, how things are today.
Okay, let's start at the top then. The monarch. The sources make it pretty clear, especially during William's reign and for quite a while after, the crown held, well, almost all the power.
Oh, absolutely. Legislative, executive, judicial, it was all wrapped up in the monarch. It's quite something to think about now.
Creating laws, running the country, being the final word on justice, all one person.
Pretty much. And it wasn't just theoretical. The king appointed judges, levied taxes, often with minimal consultation, issued decrees,
Yeah.
all based on personal will or a small group of advisors.
So the idea of a separate court system, or parliament as we know it, that took a long time.
A very long time, centuries really, for those institutions to sort of emerge and become genuinely independent from the ruler. Understanding that slow crawl is key to seeing how power eventually shifted.
Okay, so speaking of shifts, let's talk about the nobility. After 1066, William wasn't ruling alone, was he? He needed his allies.
Definitely not alone. He had his Norman buddies who fought with him, and he needed to keep them sweet, basically,
So he rewarded them.
handsomely. With English titles making them peers and huge amounts of land and riches, it was smart, really.
How so?
Well, it bought their loyalty, didn't it? And ensured he had military muscle when he needed it. They became the backbone of his new power structure here.
But as often happens, that kind of setup doesn't stay static forever. These powerful nobles, they started wanting more, right?
That's the classic pattern, isn't it? Give people power and wealth, and eventually they want more influence, more say. They started to, push back against the idea of the king having all the power.
And the big example of that pushback has to be Magna Carta,
Right.
1215.
Oh, absolutely. Magna Carta. That was the nobility really flexing its muscles against King John.
Forcing him to agree to certain limits.
Exactly. Things like, due process, limits on royal taxes without their consent. It set huge precedents, a major step in chipping away at that absolute monarchical power and carving out rights for themselves, one of the first big milestones.
So fast forward to today, we still have dukes, earls, barons. Do they still have that kind of legal clout?
Well, the titles are still there, yes, and some families are still very wealthy,
Yeah.
but their special legal powers, mostly gone.
The sources mention a couple of key acts.
Right. The Life Peerages Act, 1958, and then the House of Lords Act, 1999. These really shook up the House of Lords.
Because most members now are life peers, appointed for their achievements, not because their dad was a lord.
Precisely. The numbers tell the story. You got over 700 members in the Lords, but only 92 are hereditary peers now. The rest, life peers. That's a massive shift.
And the feeling is those 92 hereditary seats won't be around forever either. The text calls them a leftover from ancient times.
That's definitely the direction of travel. It does seem a bit, out of place in the 21st century, doesn't it? Getting a seat in Parliament just because of who you were born to.
It really makes you think, what place does inherited privilege have in making laws today? Okay, let's shift again, another powerhouse. The church.
Ah, yes, the church. And it's important, I think, to preface this by saying it might be hard for us now, thinking of religion as mostly a private thing, to grasp just how central it was legally.
Good point. Because after William, England was officially Roman Catholic, wasn't it?
Officially and legally. Pretty much everyone, apart from, say, the Jewish community, had to belong to the church, had to attend services. It wasn't optional. It was the law.
Wow. And even the king wasn't above the church?
Nope. Senior clergy, bishops, and archbishops, they advised the king, yes, but they also saw it as their job to make sure even he followed church teachings.
And the church had ways to enforce this.
Oh, definitely. A very powerful structure, a strict hierarchy, all leading up to the Pope in Rome.
Right, the Pope, ruling from the Vatican. The sources mention he had his own civil service, army, legal system.
He did indeed. He was the absolute head. And his rulings on faith, worship, morality, that wasn't just religious guidance, that was the law. Almost like a parallel legal system.
That level of power in a religious figure is quite something.
And it flowed downwards, through cardinals, archbishops, bishops, right down to the local parish priest. It meant everyone's beliefs and behavior were under scrutiny.
The text even compares it to Orwell's 1984, the sort of thought police idea.
It's a strong comparison. but it highlights how deeply the church monitored life. And its legal power had real teeth.
Like what were the tangible effects?
Well, for starters, not believing what the church taught heresy could be punished by death.
Seriously, death.
Yes. And on a more, perhaps everyday level for many, divorce was completely forbidden by church law. And because church law was, in this area, the law of the land.
There was no divorce, full stop.
Exactly. Imagine that. Stuck in a marriage, potentially forever, with no legal way out.
Unless there was the annulment.
Ah, yes, the annulment.
Yeah.
The only way out. But that wasn't like getting divorced. It was a declaration from the Pope himself that the marriage was invalid from the start, like it never legally happened.
And not easy to get, I imagine.
Extremely difficult. A very long, very expensive process. Really only an option for the very rich and powerful.
Which brings us, of course, to Henry VIII.
The classic example. His attempt to get his marriage to Catherine of Aragon annulled shows just how powerful the Pope was, even over a king.
Because the Pope refused.
He did, partly because Catherine's nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor, had basically captured the Pope and was leaning on him. Politics, as always.
And Henry's reaction wasn't exactly subtle, was it?
Not at all. He basically said, fine if you won't play ball, and took the entire country out of the Roman Catholic Church.
And created the Church of England with himself in charge.
Precisely. He became the supreme head. Now, interestingly, while it was now Protestant, the beliefs and rules of the Church of England didn't change drastically overnight. The main thing was swapping the Pope for the king at the top.
And the Church of England is still the established church today?
It is, yes. That's why the country's still divided into parishes, geographically. And you have parish councils, though they're part of local government now. Nothing religious. The air comes directly from that structure.
And we still see traces of that old power, don't we? Senior bishops sitting in the House of Lords.
Exactly. 26 lords spiritual, and the Archbishop of Canterbury still crowns the monarch.
It's like echoes of those medieval archbishops advising the king.
It really is, like
Yeah.
little glimpses of that old partnership and power. But the crucial difference now, of course, is the church can't force anyone to attend or believe anything. We have freedom of religion legally enshrined.
So, wrapping up this deep dive then,
Mm-hmm.
we've seen this incredible journey. From the monarch holding almost all the cards, to the nobility carving out their power, and the church having this immense pervasive influence on law and life.
It's quite the evolution. And, legal systems never stand still. The sources briefly mention things like EU law, even post-Brexit, external influences that continue to shape things. Maybe something for another time.
Definitely. But just thinking about these three big historical players, monarch, nobility, church, it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, considering those power dynamics we've just talked about, how much of that still echoes today in how laws get made, how society's structured, what bits have we truly left behind, and are there surprising legacies still kicking around?
That's a great question to leave folks with. Thinking about that long arc of history and how it connects, sometimes in really unexpected ways, to right now, makes you look at things a bit differently, perhaps.